Adventure Time is a show beloved by many, many people, and it still has a cult following to this very day. With the new spin-off shows coming out, it's no surprise that the show will forever stay in people's hearts. And rightfully so, because it's a great show. But what if I told you there was some lost media from the show that was very different from the rest of the tone of the show? Lost media that is very dark and very mysterious in nature, and was completely forgotten about once it started recording. That may sound crazy, but this story will tell otherwise. So, sit back, relax, and get ready for an adventure, because today we'll be reading the story of Adventure Time, The Lost Scenes. So, as many of you know, the show Adventure Time has been a massive hit. It has been for some time now. Thousands upon thousands of people tune in each week to watch the latest episode starring Finn and Jake, and many other of their friends and foes. Although the series have moved on from its early days of simpler plots and bright backgrounds, some people forget about a series of scenes spread out over a few episodes that seem to make no sense in the plot when put together create a full storyline. These scenes were much darker than the rest of the show at the time, and it creeped some people out, but people moved on and forgot about it. Except for me. So listen up, and I'll tell you about it. Alright. The first scene is located in the first episode, Slumber Party Panic. The scene only came up on the very first airing of the show, in 2010, and has not been seen since. I was lucky enough to have a friend who had recorded the first airing, so I was able to use that. The scene begins with Jake sat on the sofa in the treehouse. Nothing unusual. The colors are their usual bright self, and there is chirpy music playing in the background. He is staring off into space. All of a sudden, Finn appears at the side of the shot, almost as if someone had forgot to animate him walking in. He turns to face Jake, and Jake looks back at him. It sounds like Finn had said something, but it was so low quality and scratchy that I could not understand what he was saying, though I could hear his voice actor underneath the background noise. Jake looks at Finn in shock and stands up. The colors fade slightly, but not enough for you to notice unless you put two screenshots next to each other. Jake mutters something, but it's too quiet to hear also. Finn looks at the floor and frowns. The show then suddenly flips back to the normal episode. From what I can tell, there was no second scene in the second episode, and I even watched the original airing, so I had to go to the third episode, Prisoners of Love, to find the next out-of-place scene. The scene appeared in the first airing and a few times after that, but hasn't turned up online at all. The scene begins right where the first ended, with Jake looking at Finn with tears in his eyes, and Finn looking at the floor still. Finn walks out of the room and out onto the field surrounding the treehouse. You can see Jake stand next to the window. The shot follows Finn as he walks away from the treehouse and towards the sea. The shot slowly becomes darker and grimmer as he walks into the distance. The program then goes back to the normal episode. The third scene appears in the fourth episode, Tree Trunks, and about halfway through. The scene begins with Jake standing next to the sofa still, looking out the window, shaking slightly. The colors are mainly made up of different shades of green at this point, and the angles of the screen are darker than the middle. Jake turns around and walks towards the kitchen area. Once he arrives there, he opens a cupboard and begins to shuffle around. You can hear a tiny break as he does so. He puts his hands in the cupboard to get a better look, sighs deeply, then climbs back out. revealing that he is now holding a fork. He has small cups up one arm and his left cheek, a dark red but not dripping. He looks incredibly sad, with his face crunching up as if he is holding back tears. The program then goes back to normal. This scene did gain some popularity online, but people who were talking about it or posting photos will soon lost their blogs, or even sometimes their computers. Many deny knowing about this scene, even though they have been talking about it only a week before. The fourth scene was located in the 7th episode, Leonardo, the hot guy. And I was unfortunately able to see the full scene as my television broke midway through. I can give you a description of the first part though. The scene begins with Finn, who has now reached the beach and was standing ankle deep in the ocean. He was looking out to the sea and standing completely still, although the water was splashing against the shore and was raining heavily. He had taken off his backpack, shoes and socks off, and they were all piled up next to a pile of rocks a few feet from the ocean. Finn begins to slowly walk into sea. This continues up until he was at his waist in the water, and still walking when my television suddenly turned off. It later turned out that there was a short circuit problem with my transformer, and I had to call an electrical guy to fix it. By the time he already fixed it, the episode was already over and was on to the next Cartoon Network show. So I didn't get to see the rest of it. Sadly, none of my friends have recorded the episode by this time either, so I was unable to see what the rest of the scene was. The 5th scene appears in the 8th episode, Business Time. Near the end of the episode, the scene slowly fades in, showing Jake standing at the table, holding the fork in one hand, resting his head against the other while staring blankly at the fork. The picture quality mimics that of a 144p video on YouTube, and was a code blue. He wimpled slightly before putting his hand. He rests his hand on his palm down on the table. He stares at it for a few moments before mumbling something too quiet to hear and holding the fork above his hand, paw, and throws it down. He suddenly drops his arm and stabs himself in the hand with the fork, but the scene cuts suddenly back to the original episode before we see him stab himself. I never found anyone speaking about it online. The 6th thing is very short, but probably the most disturbing, though I'm not fully sure why. It appears in the 11th episode, Wizard, and is only a few seconds long. It is such bad quality that it looks like it was coated from a piece of film left in a glass bottle out on sea for about a month. It was covered in black pieces that dart about the screen, and I had to replay it a few times to work out what it was. It was Finn's hat floating out at sea in what looked like a storm with black clouds in the background and a massive waves crashing all over the place. It was only on for at most 5 seconds, but it's the noise that made it really shook me. It made the sound of someone screaming and angry recorded on a cheap and broken microphone, and it was shaking around and destroying the recording. It was playing as if it had been recorded quietly and played loud. It made me jump out of my seat the first time I saw it. After the scene ended, the program continued. The scene only appeared once, and it was in the second showing on Cartoon Network. I was only able to watch the 7th one on a poor quality phone camera recording of someone recording their television. From a scene that appeared at the end, I recognized it as the 13th episode, City of Thieves. The scene begins with Jake sat on the floor and making a weird moaning sound. He sits like this for a few minutes. BMO walks into the room and runs up to Jake. He tries to speak, but Jake hits him so hard that he hits the far wall and his batteries fell off and he turns off. Jake acts like nothing had happened. He turns around and stands up. He struggles slightly as he doesn't lift himself up with his hands because he was holding his hand with the other, probably because of the pain of stabbing himself. He walks up to the window and lets go of his injured paw. You still can't see it, but the hand that he used to hold it is stained red. The red color made me feel ill. It was far brighter than the rest of the scene. It practically glowed and is all you could see. The camera angle suddenly changes to being close to the window. You see his mangled hand slap against the glass, revealing the mess that used to be his hand. He had almost definitely stabbed it more than once, as the muscle and skin hung down and smashed and cracked bones were sticking out of his parts. Blood splattered against the window, and then the program cuts back to the original show. The 8th scene appeared in the 14th episode, The Witch's Garden. It began with Jake limping out of the house. His leg was now also mangled, and I guess he did that as well. The scene goes on for quite a while, showing every agonizing step that Jake took. The program cuts back again, but this one is unusual. I call it one scene as it appeared in the same episode, but then is the normal episode thrown in the middle from a separate episode. I recognize it as scenes from the episode The Juggalo, but something was terribly wrong, as there were black figures in the background of every shot. I managed to find screenshots on Live and save them before they were deleted. The program switches back, and it appears that Jake also has gone to the beach. He stands, staring out into the ocean, but the ocean this time is peaceful. The blood seeping from his wounds is drifting out to sea. He is holding something in his good hand, and it seems to be a blue, soggy piece of clothing. It was presumably Finn's sword. Perhaps it had drifted back to shore, only for Jake to find it. Jake slowly starts limping out into the water. The video cuts and goes back to the normal episode. The 9th scene turned up about 20 minutes into the 16th episode, Ocean of Fear. It shows an underwater scene. It looked as if someone had drawn a picture and sucked it into a rock pool, and then filmed it with an underwater camera. The art was badly damaged and was difficult to make out what was being shown through the water. But as it showed a still, Owen's Sabe lying down on the floor. I was guessing that it was most likely Jake, drowned. The sounds of someone drowning and screaming through the lungs with water. The scene only lasts about 10 seconds, before cutting to black for about 15 seconds. Suddenly, a face pops up for a millisecond. It made me jump, and it scared the living fuck out of me. Luckily, I was able to download the episode onto my computer and find that damn face. And let me tell you, it is something that I do not want to see at night. This is the 10th and last thing I could find. It seems to wrap up the story pretty well, so it was definitely the last one. It appears near the beginning of the 19th episode, The Duke. The scene begins with what looks like to be Princess Bubblegum. She was wearing a black dress and had a veil over her face. She is standing in front of 2 coffins. The pixel and sound quality is incredibly low, so I could barely make out what was going on. The only sounds consisted of weeping, sobbing, film crackling, and funeral music. The scene made me feel very uneasy, but mostly sad. Princess Bubblegum walks over to the coffins and opens the lid on them. We get a close-up shot of the two bodies. This sit still fucks me up to this day, and it scared me pretty badly when I first saw it, and horrified me and disgusted me. The two coffins contained the bodies of Finn and Jake. The picture quality was higher for this scene, meaning I could see every gruesome detail. Their skin was peeling away and swollen from a mixture of rot and water damage. Their eyes were missing and their mouths were wide open as if they were screaming in agony. The limbs had swiveled away and there was nothing but lumps of flesh filled with salt water. Their skin was tinted green and were shiny, and they were seeping out black fluid. The most disturbing part of all was the amount of detail was on their corpses. It was like a scene from a SpongeBob episode where they show an extremely gross close-up of a character. You could practically see each pore of their rotten skin and their rotting flesh. I didn't know that scene will forever be ingrained to my brain as long as I live. The scene then turns black, and then I hear a woman screech in terror. The scene then shows Princess Bubblegum sitting in her room. She was holding a bar of pills. She downs the whole bottle, shakes for a few minutes, and then collapses onto the floor. The scene then changes once again to her lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by members of the Candy Kingdom. There's a sign on the end of the band that reads, "Coma." The program then goes back to the normal episode. But there was something unusual about the way it went back to the normal program this time. It wraps back, like what happens when a dream sequence happens. So, after everything I experienced, I have come up with a conclusion. I believe that these scenes put the title tell a disturbing story. I think that what happened was that something bad happened, and it hurt Finn and Jake deeply, causing them to self-harm and commit suicide. Their bodies were later found a while after, which explains the scenes of them and their belongings out at sea, and the severe damage their corpses went through before being found. They held a funeral with the caskets closed because of the state of their corpses are in. But Princess Bubblegum opens the caskets and was scarred by what she saw, which explained the blood-curdling scream and the attempts to kill herself, although she was not successful and it left her in a coma. Which is why all that happens after Series 1 is actually Princess Bubblegum's dreams. Well, Finn and Jake are still alive in her fantasy world. It's a very sad and depressing thought, I know. But believe me, that's what 100% what definitely happened. Now, don't get me wrong. Even after what the crazy set I saw, I still watch Adventure Time up to this day. But I believe that the show will end once Princess Bubblegum is removed from life support. And there you have it. Now you know the lost media of Adventure Time.